Hello everyone, and welcome to week number 1 of the course. Very happy to have you here. Just a few housekeeping items before we kind of get into the meat of actual discussion. First, really want to encourage you to take a quick look at the week number 1 discussion board. We've designed this to be super easy and straightforward. Just a quick opportunity for you to introduce yourself to the class and to your classmates. But please make sure you get that taken care of. Go ahead and plan ahead, please, for case study number 1. It's due pretty soon, and the material is based really entirely upon both this micro lecture and just the general course material for week number 1. So take a look at it. I would encourage you to do that really soon and just sort of start thinking about it. Hopefully, this micro lecture and all the readings for this week will help you get that taken care of and set you up for success on that. As always, please let Peter and I know if you have any questions or need anything. We are always available and would be very, very happy to help you with anything you might need. And definitely take a look at the readings and all the course material for this week. I'm going to very quickly go through some sort of basics of the material and the subject matter in this micro lecture. It's not designed to be comprehensive, so please make sure you take a look at the readings and digest that information. So what is student development theory kind of in a nutshell? I like to think of it as just a set of frameworks that guide our work with college students. They are designed to really meet students where they are, as opposed to where we are. I hope that makes sense. And really helps us to guide them in their growth and development. I like to think of them as well as being both passive and actively important. So what on earth do I mean by that? It's pretty rare, to be candid with you, in the course of my day that I actively apply student development theory. I don't sit with a student and think, what vector of Chickering are they in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really one of those things that sits in the back of my brain and passively helps guide me in my work with students. So I want you to think of them both in terms of detail and making sure you sort of know the theories and know the basic principles, but also just bear in mind that it's going to be pretty rare that you actively are applying them as opposed to letting them tacitly sit in the back of your brain and help guide your work with the students. Why is it so important? And why did we start with student development theory in this class? Well, candidly, you're flying blind without some basic principles of student development theory. So we wanted to make sure to front load the class with this really important information because it guides a lot of the work that we do as student affairs professionals, as higher education professionals, and just as educators and human beings in general, when we're working with college students. So it's at the core of the work that we're doing with college students. So real quick covering of the basic principles of student development theory. First and foremost, and I can't possibly stress this enough, student development theory really frames our work, as the core concept that students are individuals. So we hear a lot in the media and society about, we got to treat everybody equal. We got to make sure that everybody's being treated equally, and that's somehow, a thing. I would encourage you to set that aside for the moment and think about students as individual human beings. We meet them where they are, and, in student development theory, you could be having an entirely different experience and conversation with one student versus another student, depending on what their needs are, depending on what theory you're applying, and depending on the set of circumstances. So again, very individualized approach. Emotional, physical, and mental aspects of a student are all equally important. So again, really that holistic concept that students are complex individuals that need to be treated as such. And we can't ignore, for example, the physical aspects of how students are developing, and focus solely on their emotional development. We have to sort of pay some real close attention to all of the facets of development. Challenge and support. So, contrary to common belief, college students both enjoy and need to be challenged. The problem is they really shouldn't be challenged without being supported at the same time. So don't think of it as blindly just throwing students to the wolves. Those days are well over in higher education. Instead, think about strongly challenging students, but balancing that challenge by supporting them appropriately. And finally, and again, really important concept, student development occurs both inside and outside of classroom settings. So we're going to talk about this a lot more, further into the course, especially as we start talking about, student learning environments, because those occur both inside and outside of the classroom. But student development absolutely occurs both inside and outside of the classroom. So start thinking about applicability, thinking about the types of things that may occur inside of the classroom, outside of the classroom, and how the principles and the theories apply. So I want to talk for a minute just about a couple of what I consider the core student development theories. Not that they're the only ones by any means, but I don't want to spend all day with you, in a microlecture, so just sort of talking about all of the detail. So I'm going to pick two. And I'm going to start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I chose this because, frankly, I probably apply it, more often than any other student development theory. It's an old model, but it's really commonly used. It's used not only in higher education, but in a variety of settings, both clinical and, healthcare and social work, and a variety of other settings that involve supporting other individuals. And it really helps us focus on linear order, focus on core needs of students, because if they don't have their basic stuff taken care of, and the basic needs taken care of, they can't then really move into a different level of development. So let me give you an example. If you're working with a student and they are not living in a safe environment, whether that be a domestic abuse situation or just physically not safe environment, it is almost impossible that you're going to be able to encourage that student to focus on cognitive development or self-actualization or anything along those lines, or even belongingness. So if a student's hungry, if a student doesn't have basic needs taken care of, they're not going to be engaged in more advanced work. So this is why you're seeing more and more scenarios with colleges and universities, around the world, really focusing on things like food banks and making sure that programming around basic needs and programming around domestic violence awareness and housing awareness and things like that are really a strong focus. Again, so the students' needs are taken care of, and they can then advance into more intricate work and more intricate development. So, second model I want to talk about real quick is Bloom's taxonomy. This I chose because I think it's probably the most holistic model and super practical and useful. I use it pretty regularly when I'm advising a student, whether that be academic advising or just general life advising or mentorship. I find it also very helpful with general leadership principles. I candidly both with student staff and with general staff. Bloom encourages us to think about three domains. There's no linear nature to them like Maslow. It's really just designed to swirl around. You've got the cognitive domain that includes, intellectual development, mental development, the affective, which includes, attitude and how we deal with emotions, and the psychomotor, or more commonly just the motor domain, which is coordination and motor skills and things like that. So again, when we think about, it's not, you can't just focus on mental, you can't just focus on physical, you can't just focus on emotional and intellectual. You got to focus on all of the aspects of student development in order for a student to be well-rounded and for them to develop appropriately. So I know that was quick. I want to encourage you really strongly to refer to the post-it materials because they're going to give you much more detail. This was just designed to get your feet wet and to give you just a general introduction to the topic. Again, hopefully it's becoming obvious to you that you're going to both actively and passively be applying the theories and really also the basic premises of student development. These aren't things that often you're going to actively recall and that you're going to think about the detail of it when you're talking about a student, but more often than not are going to be things, again, in the back of your brain that are going to influence your conversations and influence your work. And again, I want to just leave you with the thought that challenge is fine. Set aside the notion that college students can't be challenged or that they don't want to be challenged and that they want everything easy. They may say that sometimes, but really, challenge is awesome as long as it's supported. Likewise, although we try and avoid crisis, it's going to happen. It's going to happen with every college student at least once, probably more often than not if they're like me. And, it can be an unpleasant experience and environment, But sometimes the most amount of learning, the most amount of opportunity for development, comes out of a crisis situation. So don't shy away from it. Be supportive. Try and help the student as much as you can, and think about what they can gain from it, and encourage them as well as they're coming out of the crisis to reflect back upon that experience and to gain as much as they can.